This is the story of Elena Russi, a woman who spent 20 years as the invisible foundation of her family, providing everything while receiving no gratitude in return. After years of being treated like a servant in her own home, she quietly built a secret life that eventually led her to a villa by the sea and total independence. It is a moving tale of silent sacrifice, a brilliant escape, and the moment a woman finally closes the gate on her past to live for herself. The house on Cedar Street was never truly clean. Elena had learned this lesson early, in the years after she moved back home to care for her aging parents. She could spend an entire morning scrubbing the kitchen counters until they gleamed, mopping the hardwood floors until they reflected the pale light from the windows, folding the laundry into neat, precise squares. And within hours, sometimes minutes, the disorder would return. A coffee cup left on the freshly wiped counter, shoes tracking dirt across the mopped floor, a sweater tossed over the back of a chair instead of hung in the closet. The house absorbed her labor like a stone absorbing water, leaving no visible trace of her effort. She had stopped expecting gratitude years ago. Gratitude was for other daughters, the ones who visited on holidays, who brought flowers and wine, and left before the dishes needed washing. Elena was not a visitor. Elena was the foundation, and foundations, by their nature, were invisible. The morning of her mother's cardiology appointment, Elena rose at 5:30. She showered in the cramped bathroom off the kitchen, the one her mother called the guest bath, though no guests had stayed in this house in years, and dressed in her usual uniform. Dark jeans, a simple blouse, comfortable shoes. She brewed coffee and set out her father's medication in the small plastic cups she had labeled with the days of the week. She made her mother's oatmeal with cinnamon and sliced bananas, the way she liked it, and carried it to the bedroom on a tray. "Good morning, Mom." Elena set the tray on the nightstand and opened the curtains. The morning light fell across her mother's face, illuminating the deep lines around her mouth, the thin white hair that had once been thick and dark. "Your appointment is at 9. We should leave by 8:15 to account for traffic." Her mother pushed herself up against the pillows, her movements slow and careful. "Did you remember to call the pharmacy about your father's prescription? He's been out of the blood pressure medication for 2 days. I called yesterday. It'll be ready this afternoon." Elena had called 3 times, in fact, navigating the automated system and the long hold times while she folded laundry and planned the week's meals. "I'll pick it up after the appointment." Her mother nodded, satisfied. She picked up her spoon and began to eat, her eyes already drifting toward the window, toward the world outside that she observed but no longer participated in. "Your sister sent another postcard, from Santorini this time. The pictures are beautiful. She looks so happy." Elena said nothing. She had seen the postcard. Her mother had left it on the kitchen counter, propped against the fruit bowl, a splash of Aegean blue against the beige tile. Chloe, golden and laughing, her blonde hair whipped by the wind, a glass of white wine in her hand. The caption their mother had posted on social media read, "Our world traveler making us proud. So wonderful to see Chloe living her best life." There were no posts about Elena. There were no photos of her folding her father's medication into neat little cups, or driving through morning traffic to cardiology appointments, or sitting in hospital waiting rooms with her hands folded in her lap. Those moments were not proud moments. They were simply what was expected. The cardiology appointment took 3 hours. Elena sat in the waiting room, flipping through outdated magazines, while her mother was examined and tested and counseled. When the doctor finally emerged, his face carefully neutral, Elena listened to the familiar litany. Her mother's heart was weakening. The medications were helping, but they weren't a cure. Lifestyle changes, less stress, more rest, careful monitoring were essential. "Does she have support at home?" the doctor asked, his eyes on Elena. "Yes," Elena said. "I'm there full time." The doctor nodded, satisfied, and moved on to the next patient. Elena collected her mother from the examination room, guided her to the car, and drove to the pharmacy. She waited in another line, picked up her father's prescription, and drove home. She made lunch, sandwiches, and soup, easy to digest, and cleaned up afterward. She helped her father with his physical therapy exercises, gentle movements designed to keep his joints from seizing. She paid the utility bills online, balanced the checkbook, and planned the next week's grocery list. At 4 o'clock, her mother called from the living room. "Elena, come see this." Elena walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her mother was holding her phone, the screen turned toward her, her face alight with genuine joy. Chloe had posted a new photo, this one from a cliffside restaurant, the caldera of Santorini glowing in the sunset behind her. She was wearing a flowing white dress, her hair loose, her smile radiant. The caption read, "Chasing sunsets and dreams. So grateful for this journey." "Isn't she beautiful?" her mother breathed. "She looks like a movie star. I'm going to share this one." Elena watched her mother's fingers move across the screen, typing a comment full of heart emojis and proud exclamation points. She thought about the 3 hours in the waiting room, the line at the pharmacy, the sandwiches and soup, the physical therapy exercises, the bills, the grocery list. None of it would be posted. None of it would be celebrated. "Mom," Elena said quietly, "I was thinking, next weekend, maybe I could take a couple of days, just Saturday and Sunday, go up to the coast, clear my head. Mrs. Patterson next door said she could check in on you and Dad. She's a retired nurse. She knows what to." Her mother's head snapped up. The warmth in her face vanished, replaced by something harder. "And who will look after us? Your father can't manage his medications on his own. You know that. And my heart? The doctor just said I need to avoid stress. Having a stranger in the house, even Mrs. Patterson, would be very stressful for me, Elena." "She's not a stranger. She's lived next door for 20 years. And it would only be 2 days. 2 days is a long time when you're our age." Her mother set down her phone, her expression shifting into something wounded, almost accusatory. "You're the reliable one, Elena. You always have been. You don't need those flashy trips. That's for people like your sister, people who need to find themselves. You've always known who you are. You're our rock. Our rock." The words were meant to be a compliment. Elena had heard them her entire life, from the time she was a girl, when she stayed home to help with her infant sister while her friends went to sleepovers and birthday parties. "Elena is so reliable. Elena is so responsible. We don't know what we'd do without Elena." But the words were also a cage. Rocks didn't move. Rocks didn't travel. Rocks stayed where they were placed and bore the weight of everything around them. "Mom," Elena tried again, "I'm not asking for a flashy trip. I'm asking for 2 days. 2 days to breathe. I haven't had a day off in over a year." Her mother's face crumpled, not with sympathy, but with the particular manipulation of a woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of making her needs the only needs that mattered. "If you need to leave, Elena, then leave. I won't stop you, but I hope you can live with yourself knowing you abandoned your parents when they needed you most. After everything we've done for you, after we gave you a home when you had nowhere else to go." A home when you had nowhere else to go. Elena had moved back into this house 5 years ago, after her divorce, when her savings had been drained by legal fees and her ex-husband had kept the apartment. She had intended to stay for 6 months, just long enough to rebuild, to find her footing, to start again. But 6 months had become a year, and a year had become 5, and somewhere along the way, her role had shifted from daughter to caretaker, from temporary guest to permanent foundation. And no one had ever asked if this was the life she wanted. She looked at her mother, at the woman who posted glowing tributes to Chloe's travels while dismissing Elena's need for a single weekend, at the woman who called her reliable as if it were a virtue rather than a sentence. "Okay," Elena said quietly. "I'll stay." Her mother's face softened immediately, the manipulation giving way to satisfaction. "I knew you'd understand. You're such a good daughter, Elena. We're so lucky to have you." She picked up her phone again and resumed scrolling through Chloe's photos, her thumb pausing to like each one, her face alight with vicarious joy. Elena stood there for a moment longer, the dish towel still in her hands, and felt something shift inside her. Not break, shift. Like a gear clicking into place, like a lock finally turning after years of being jammed. She walked back to the kitchen and resumed washing the dishes. The water was warm, the soap soft on her hands. Through the window, she could see the small, neglected garden her mother had once tended, now overgrown. The roses strangled by weeds, the lavender long since gone to seed. She thought about Chloe, golden and laughing, chasing sunsets in Santorini. She thought about her parents, posting proud comments from the house Elena kept running. She thought about the word reliable and how it had been used her entire life to ask her to carry more than her share. And for the first time in 5 years, Elena allowed herself to imagine something different. Not a flashy trip, not a postcard-worthy adventure, just a life that was hers. A life where she was more than a foundation, a life where she could breathe. She finished the dishes and dried her hands. She walked to her small bedroom, the one she had slept in as a girl, the one that still had the faded wallpaper and the single window looking out onto the side yard, and sat on the edge of her bed. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't thought about in years. Her old supervisor from the marketing firm where she had worked before her marriage, before her divorce, before she became the invisible daughter. She typed a message. "Hi, Margaret. This is Elena. I know it's been a long time, but I was wondering if you might have any freelance work available. I'm looking to get back into the industry, quietly, slowly, just testing the waters." She hit send. Then she set down her phone and looked out the window at the overgrown garden, the weeds, the lavender that had once bloomed purple and fragrant and alive. She didn't know if Margaret would respond. She didn't know if she could rebuild a career she had abandoned 5 years ago. She didn't know if she had the strength to claw her way out of the life that had been assigned to her. But for the first time in a very long time, she was willing to try. The first step was the smallest. Margaret responded to Elena's message within 3 days. The email was brief and professional. Margaret had always been brief and professional, a woman who valued efficiency over sentiment, but there was warmth beneath the words. "Elena, good to hear from you. I have a small project that might suit your skills. Remote, flexible hours, not glamorous, but steady. Let's talk." They talked. The project was a research and analysis contract for a boutique real estate development firm that specialized in international luxury properties. Elena's role would be to compile market data, analyze trends, and prepare reports for clients, considering investments in coastal properties across Europe and the Mediterranean. The pay was modest, but the work was interesting, and, most importantly, it could be done entirely from her laptop on her own schedule. Elena accepted before Margaret finished explaining the terms. She began working that same week, in the hours between 10 at night and 2 in the morning, when the house on Cedar Street finally fell quiet. Her mother slept fitfully, waking often to use the bathroom or request a glass of water. But after 10 o'clock, the interruptions diminished. Her father took his sleeping medication at 9 and was unconscious within the hour, his snores a low, rhythmic rumble through the thin walls. The house, which had felt like a prison during the day, became something else at night, a quiet, empty space where Elena could finally breathe. She set up her workspace at the small desk in the corner of her bedroom, the one she had used as a girl to do her homework. She bought a cheap desk lamp with a dimmer switch so the light wouldn't bleed under the door and alert her mother to her wakefulness. She invested in noise-canceling headphones, the kind that blocked out the distant hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old house settling. And she worked. The research was absorbing. She learned about coastal property markets in Portugal, Spain, Greece, and southern Italy, the ebb and flow of prices, the regulatory landscapes, the hidden gems that savvy investors sought out. She compiled data on rental yields and capital appreciation, on visa requirements and tax implications, on the subtle differences between a tourist hotspot and a truly exclusive retreat. She wrote reports that were clear, thorough, and insightful. Margaret began sending her more projects, then larger projects, then clients who requested her by name. Within 6 months, Elena was earning more from her nighttime work than she had ever earned at her old marketing job. She didn't tell her parents. She didn't tell anyone. The money went into a separate bank account, one she had opened at a small credit union across town, one that sent statements to a P.O. box rather than the house on Cedar Street. She watched the balance grow with a quiet, private satisfaction. Each deposit was a brick. Each brick was a step toward a door she was building in the dark. The second step was the storage unit. Elena rented it on a Tuesday afternoon during the 2-hour window when her mother attended her weekly bridge club and her father napped in his recliner. It was a small unit in a facility on the edge of town, clean and secure and utterly anonymous. She paid for a year in advance, using cash she had withdrawn in small increments over several weeks to avoid raising any flags. The manager, a tired-looking man in his 60s, handed her the key without asking any questions. He had seen people like Elena before, she realized, people who were quietly, methodically, preparing to leave something behind. She began moving her things in small, unnoticeable increments. A box of books she had loved as a girl, ones her mother had threatened to donate to the library, her winter coats, the ones she never wore because she never went anywhere that required more than a practical jacket. Photographs of her grandmother, the only person in her family who had ever looked at Elena and seen more than a reliable pair of hands. Her birth certificate, her passport, her social security card, documents her mother had always kept in a locked drawer, claiming it was safer that way. Elena had found the key years ago, tucked behind the silverware in the dining room cabinet. She made copies of everything and returned the originals to the drawer, exactly as they had been. She moved slowly, patiently, a single item at a time, slipped into her tote bag, and carried out of the house under the guise of running errands. Her mother noticed nothing. Her father noticed nothing. They saw Elena as they had always seen her, a permanent fixture, a piece of furniture, a reliable presence that required no observation because it would never change. And Elena let them believe it. She continued to cook their meals, manage their medications, drive them to appointments, and clean the house that was never truly clean. She smiled when her mother showed her Chloe's latest photos, Chloe in Paris, Chloe in Rome, Chloe on a yacht in the Amalfi Coast, her blonde hair streaming in the wind, her smile radiant and carefree. She nodded when her parents talked about the money they had sent Chloe to support her dreams, the savings they had drained, the retirement they had postponed. She said nothing when her mother mentioned casually that they were counting on Elena to care for them in their old age, that it was the least she could do after everything they had done for her. She simply worked and saved and planned. The third step was the hardest. 18 months into her secret career, Elena received an offer that changed everything. One of her clients, a private investor based in Lisbon, a woman named Sophia, who had built her own fortune in tech and now spent her time acquiring and restoring historic properties along the Portuguese coast, had been reading Elena's reports for months. She had been impressed not just by the quality of the research, but by the insight. Elena didn't just compile data. She understood it. She saw patterns others missed. She had an instinct for value, for potential, for the hidden beauty in overlooked places. Sophia wanted to meet in person in Lisbon. Elena read the email 3 times, her heart pounding. The trip would require 4 days, 2 for travel, 2 for meetings, 4 days away from the house on Cedar Street, 4 days of not being the reliable one, the foundation, the invisible daughter who held everything together. She thought about it for a week. She drafted responses and deleted them. She lay awake at night, listening to her father's snores and her mother's restless stirrings, and weighed the risks. If she went, her parents would be furious. They would accuse her of abandonment, of selfishness, of failing in her duty. They might even try to stop her, not with locks and chains, but with guilt, the weapon they had wielded her entire life. After everything we've done for you. After we gave you a home. You're the reliable one, Elena. You don't need those flashy trips. But if she didn't go, she would lose the opportunity. Sophia was not a patient woman. She valued decisiveness, action, the willingness to take risks. If Elena declined this meeting, there would not be another. She booked a flight. She told her parents 2 weeks before the departure date, choosing a moment when they were both in the living room, her mother scrolling through Chloe's Instagram, her father dozing in his recliner. She stood in the doorway, her hands clasped before her, her voice steady. "I'm going to Lisbon for a few days, a work trip. I'll be gone from Thursday to Sunday." The silence that followed was immense. Her mother's thumb froze on the screen. Her father's eyes opened, bleary and confused. "What?" her mother said. "What are you talking about? What work trip? You don't work, Elena. You take care of us." "I have a job," Elena said quietly. "I've had one for a while now. Freelance consulting. It's remote, so I've been doing it from home. But this client wants to meet in person. It's a good opportunity, a really good opportunity." Her mother's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then, predictably, betrayal. "You've been working behind our backs while you were supposed to be taking care of us?" "I've been taking care of you," Elena said. "I still am. I've arranged for Mrs. Patterson to check in while I'm gone. She'll make sure Dad takes his medications and that you have everything you need. It's only 4 days." "4 days?" Her mother's voice rose, sharp and wounded. 4 days is a lifetime at our age, Elena. What if something happens? What if your father falls? What if my heart? Mrs. Patterson is a retired nurse. She's more qualified to handle an emergency than I am. Elena's voice didn't waver. "I've left detailed instructions. Everything is arranged. You'll be fine." Her mother stared at her, her eyes glittering with unshed tears. "I can't believe you're doing this. After everything we've sacrificed for you. After we gave you a home when you had nowhere else to go. This is how you repay us? By sneaking around, keeping secrets, abandoning us when we need you most?" Elena looked at her mother, at the woman who had spent years posting glowing tributes to Chloe's travels while dismissing Elena's needs as irrelevant, at the woman who had drained her savings to fund Chloe's influencer career while assuming Elena would always be there to provide free labor and a safety net, the woman who had never once in Elena's entire life asked her what she wanted. "I'm not abandoning you," Elena said. "I'm taking a work trip, 4 days. I'll be back on Sunday. And when I return, we're going to have a conversation about the future, about my future, because I can't keep living like this. I can't keep being the only one who sacrifices." She turned and walked out of the room before her mother could respond. She climbed the stairs to her bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of her bed. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. But beneath the fear, there was something else. Something that felt like the first breath of air after years of drowning. She was going to Lisbon. She was going to meet Sophia. And whatever happened after that, whatever her parents said, whatever guilt they wielded, she would face it when she returned. But first, she would go. The trip to Lisbon changed everything. Sophia was everything Elena had imagined and more. Sharp, warm, fiercely intelligent, and utterly uninterested in pretense. She met Elena at a small cafe in the Alfama district, the ancient streets winding around them, the sound of fado music drifting from an open window. They talked for hours about real estate and markets and the subtle art of seeing value where others saw only neglect. Sophia asked questions Elena hadn't expected about her background, her instincts, her vision for the kind of work she wanted to do. Elena answered honestly, surprising herself with her own clarity. By the end of the second day, Sophia had offered her a full-time position. Not freelance, not remote. A real job, based in Lisbon, with a salary that made Elena's carefully saved nest egg look like pocket change. The role would involve traveling, scouting properties, meeting with clients, building a portfolio of exclusive retreats across the Mediterranean. It was the kind of job Elena had never allowed herself to imagine. The kind of life she had been told her entire existence was for other people. People like Chloe, not people like her. "I'll need to think about it," Elena said, though every fiber of her being was screaming yes. Sophia smiled, as if she understood exactly what Elena was weighing. Take your time, but not too much. Opportunities like this don't wait forever, and neither should you. Elena flew home on Sunday, her mind spinning. She walked into the house on Cedar Street and found it exactly as she had left it. Her mother in the living room, scrolling through Chloe's photos. Her father in his recliner, dozing. They looked up when she entered, their expressions a mixture of relief and resentment. "You're back," her mother said. It wasn't a welcome, it was an accusation. "I'm back," Elena said. She set down her bag and looked around the house. The faded wallpaper, the cluttered surfaces, the weight of years pressing down on every corner. But not for long. Her mother's face went still. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm moving out. I've been offered a job in Lisbon. A real job doing work I love. I'm going to take it." The silence that followed was the loudest thing Elena had ever heard. Her mother's mouth opened and closed. Her father blinked, confused, as if Elena had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "You can't," her mother whispered. "You can't leave us. Who will take care of us? Who will manage the house, the appointments, That's not my responsibility anymore," Elena said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of a woman who had finally stopped asking for permission to exist. "I've spent 5 years being your foundation. I've given up my career, my time, my life, while you poured everything into Chloe and assumed I would always be here to pick up the pieces. I'm done. I'm choosing myself." She walked to her bedroom and began to pack. She didn't have much. Most of her things were already in the storage unit. Just a few clothes, her laptop, the small wooden box containing her grandmother's photographs. She carried them downstairs, past her stunned parents, and out to her car. At the door, she paused and looked back. Her mother was standing in the living room, her face a mask of devastation. Her father was still in his recliner, staring at nothing. "I'll call you," Elena said, "when I'm settled, and I'll send you the information for a home health aide, someone who can help with the things I used to do. But I'm not coming back, not to stay, not ever again." She walked out, closed the door, and drove away. The house on Cedar Street receded in her rearview mirror, growing smaller and smaller until it was just another shape in the distance. And Elena, for the first time in 5 years, drove towards something instead of away from it. She was free. Chloe's flight from Ibiza landed at 3 in the afternoon. She had spent the past 6 months drifting between beach clubs and yoga retreats, her days a blur of golden sand and rosé wine, and the particular effortless hedonism of people who had never been asked to carry anything heavier than a designer tote. Her Instagram was a carefully curated gallery of sunsets and smoothie bowls and candid shots of her laughing with beautiful strangers. The captions were always the same: "Chasing joy, finding myself, grateful for this journey." Her parents commented on every post with heart emojis and proud exclamation points. Elena had stopped looking years ago. The flight was uneventful. Chloe napped for most of it, her silk eye mask blocking out the cabin light, her noise-canceling headphones playing a playlist titled "Good Vibes Only." She dreamed of her mother's lasagna, the one with the 3 cheeses and the crispy edges, the one Elena had learned to make because their mother's arthritis made it too painful to knead the dough. She dreamed of her childhood bedroom, which she assumed would be clean and waiting, the sheets fresh, the closet empty and ready for her latest acquisitions. She dreamed of being welcomed home the way she had always been welcomed, with open arms, warm food, and the quiet, invisible labor of the sister who made everything possible. She took a taxi from the airport, her single designer suitcase. She traveled light, always, because she never stayed anywhere long enough to need more, riding in the trunk. The driver was a quiet man with gray hair and tired eyes, and he didn't ask her about her trip or compliment her tan. Chloe found this mildly irritating, but let it go. She was too busy composing the perfect Instagram caption for her return. Home, the most beautiful word in any language. So grateful for my amazing family who always keeps the light on for me. The house on Cedar Street looked the same as it always had, the same faded beige paint, the same overgrown shrubs flanking the front steps, the same neglected garden, the roses strangled by weeds, the lavender long since gone to seed. Chloe noticed none of this. She was already imagining the smell of her mother's cooking, the warmth of her childhood bedroom, the comforting familiarity of a place where she was always the center of attention. She unlocked the door with a key she still carried on her keychain, a souvenir from a trip to Paris, a small Eiffel Tower charm that jingled against her house key, and stepped inside. The house was silent, not the peaceful silence of a home at rest, not the expectant silence of a family waiting to surprise her. A different silence, a hollow silence, the silence of a space that had been emptied of something essential. "Mom?" Chloe's voice echoed in the foyer. "Dad? I'm home." No answer. She set down her suitcase and walked through the living room. The furniture was the same, the worn sofa, the recliner where her father spent most of his days, the coffee table cluttered with magazines and remote controls. But something was different, something she couldn't quite name. The air felt still, unused, as if the room had been waiting for someone who hadn't come. She walked into the kitchen. The counters were clean, cleaner than she had ever seen them. No dishes in the sink, no coffee cup left beside the stove, no evidence of the constant quiet labor that had once kept this house running. The refrigerator hummed softly, and when Chloe opened it, she found it nearly empty. A carton of milk, a few eggs, container of leftover soup, neatly labeled with a date from 3 days ago. Nothing else. "Mom!" Her voice was thinner now, edged with something that might have been unease. "Dad, where are you?" She heard a sound from upstairs, the creak of a floorboard, the soft shuffle of footsteps. Relief flooded through her. They were here. They had probably just been napping. Everything was fine. She climbed the stairs, her hand on the familiar banister, and found her parents in their bedroom. Her mother was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the wall. Her father was in his recliner. He had a smaller one in the bedroom now because the stairs were getting too hard for him. His eyes half closed, his breathing slow and shallow. "Mom?" Chloe stepped into the room. "What's going on? Where is everyone? Where's Elena?" Her mother looked up. Her face, which had always lit up at the sight of her younger daughter, was pale and drawn. Eyes were red-rimmed as if she had been crying. "She's gone," Chloe blinked. "Gone? What do you mean, gone? Gone where?" "Gone." Her mother's voice was flat, hollow. "She left 3 weeks ago. She packed her things and moved away. She said she was done. She said she wasn't coming back." The words didn't make sense. Chloe heard them, each one distinct and clear, but they refused to assemble into meaning. Elena, gone, not coming back. Elena was the reliable one, the foundation, the sister who stayed home while Chloe traveled, who cooked the meals and managed the bills and drove their parents to appointments. Elena didn't leave. Elena couldn't leave. Elena was the reason Chloe could leave. "That's impossible," Chloe said. She wouldn't leave without telling me, without saying goodbye." "She didn't tell anyone." Her mother's voice cracked. "She just went." She left a stack of papers on the kitchen counter. Manuals, instructions, a list of cleaning services and meal delivery companies, like we were a project she was handing off, like we were nothing. Chloe stared at her mother. Then she turned and walked back downstairs, her footsteps quick and sharp. She went to the kitchen and found the stack her mother had described. It was neatly organized, each document labeled in Elena's precise handwriting. How to use the washing machine, with diagrams. Dad's medication schedule, weekly overview. Mom's dietary restrictions and meal suggestions. Local home health aides, vetted and recommended. Emergency contact numbers. There was no note for Chloe, no personal message, no explanation. Just the cold clinical efficiency of a woman who had spent years being taken for granted and had finally, completely stopped caring. Chloe pulled out her phone and called Elena's number. It rang once, then went to voicemail. A generic recording, not Elena's voice. She tried again. Same result. She sent a text. Didn't deliver. She tried Instagram. Elena's account was gone. Facebook, gone. Every digital trace of her sister had been erased, as if Elena had decided that the only way to be free was to become invisible in an entirely new way. Chloe stood in the silent kitchen, her phone in her hand, and felt something she had never felt before. Not guilt. She wasn't capable of that. Not really. But something adjacent to it. A vague, uncomfortable awareness that the world had shifted beneath her feet and she didn't know how to stand on the new ground. She looked at the manuals on the counter, at her sister's careful handwriting, at the years of invisible labor reduced to a stack of instructions for people who had never bothered to learn. And for the first time in her life, Chloe wondered what Elena had been feeling all those years, while Chloe chased sunsets and posted selfies and basked in their parents' pride, while Elena cooked and cleaned and drove to appointments and asked for nothing, while the family poured their savings into Chloe's influencer career and assumed Elena would always be there, reliable and invisible, a foundation that required no maintenance. Chloe had never wondered before. She had never needed to. 6,000 miles away, Elena stood on the terrace of her villa and watched the sun rise over the Mediterranean. The villa was small by the standards of the region, a restored farmhouse on a hillside overlooking the sea, with whitewashed walls and a terracotta roof, and a garden she had planted herself. Lavender, mostly, and rosemary, and a single lemon tree, its branches heavy with fruit. The property had been one of Sophia's finds, a neglected gem, overlooked by investors who wanted something flashier, something more obviously luxurious. Elena had seen it and known instantly that it was hers. She had purchased it 6 months ago, using the savings she had accumulated over 3 years of secret work. Transaction had been handled through the firm, discreetly, with Sophia's help. Her parents didn't know. Chloe didn't know. No one from her old life knew that Elena now owned a piece of the Mediterranean coast, a place where the light was golden and the air smelled of salt and lavender and the quiet hum of bees. The morning she moved in, she had walked through the empty rooms, the kitchen with its worn stone counters, the bedroom with its window facing the sea, the small study where she would work, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the temporary peace of a quiet moment, stolen between obligations. Real peace. The peace of a life that was finally, completely her own. She had furnished the villa slowly, carefully, choosing each piece with intention. A wooden table where she could eat her meals, looking out at the water. A comfortable chair where she could read in the evenings, the sound of the waves, a distant murmur. A desk by the window where she worked on Sophia's projects, scouting new properties, analyzing markets, building a career that was entirely hers. She had planted the garden herself, kneeling in the rocky soil, her hands learning the feel of the earth. The lavender had taken root quickly, its purple blooms filling the air with a soft, sweet fragrance. The rosemary grew wild and fragrant. The lemon tree, transplanted from a nearby nursery, had already produced its first small harvest. She had no television, no social media, no phone number that connected her to the house on Cedar Street. She had a new number now, one she shared only with Sophia, a few trusted colleagues, and the small circle of friends she was beginning to build. Women like her, who had left behind lives that asked too much and given too little. Women who understood that freedom was not something you were given. It was something you took. This morning, she had woken before dawn, as she often did. She had made coffee in the small ceramic pot she had bought at a local market and carried it to the terrace. She had watched the sky shift from gray to rose to gold, the sea glittering below her like a vast, breathing creature. And she had thought for the first time in weeks about the house on Cedar Street. She didn't miss it. She didn't miss the endless labor, the invisible sacrifices, the way her parents had looked through her as if she were a piece of furniture. She didn't miss Chloe's postcards, her parents' proud social media posts, the constant, grinding message that Elena's worth was measured in her usefulness, while Chloe's was measured in her existence. But she wondered sometimes if they had noticed her absence, if her mother had struggled to use the washing machine, if her father had missed his medications, if Chloe had returned from Ibiza expecting a home-cooked feast and found only silence. She wondered if they understood now what they had lost. Probably not. People like her parents, like Chloe, rarely understood the value of what they took for granted. They noticed only the absence of service, not the absence of the person who had provided it. They would hire a cleaning service, a home health aide, a meal delivery company. They would replace Elena's labor with paid labor and tell themselves that nothing had really changed. But something had changed. Elena had changed. She was no longer the reliable daughter, the invisible foundation, the woman who asked for nothing and received less. She was Elena Rossi now. She had taken her grandmother's maiden name, a small act of reclamation, and she lived in a villa by the sea, and the only person she had to care for was herself. She finished her coffee and set the cup on the stone railing. The sun was fully up now, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Below her, the sea stretched to the horizon, endless and glittering. The lavender swayed gently in the morning breeze. The lemon tree cast a small, perfect shadow on the terrace stones. She thought about her parents 6,000 miles away, waking in the silent house on Cedar Street. She thought about Chloe, probably already planning her next escape, her next adventure, her next postcard-worthy moment. She thought about the life she had left behind, the life that had been assigned to her, not chosen, and then she let it go. She walked back inside, to the kitchen, with its worn stone counters and the small vase of fresh lavender she had placed on the windowsill. She rinsed her coffee cup and set it in the drying rack. She opened her laptop and reviewed the day's work. A new property in southern Portugal, a historic estate that needed restoration, a client who trusted her eye. She was Elena Rossi. She lived in a villa by the sea, and for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The gate buzzer rang at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Elena was in the garden, her hands buried in the cool, dark soil, planting a new row of lavender along the stone wall that bordered the terrace. The Mediterranean sun was warm on her shoulders, the air soft and fragrant with rosemary and the distant salt of the sea. She had learned over the past year that gardening was not a chore, but a meditation, a way of being present in her own life, of tending to something that asked nothing of her but patience and care. The buzzer rang again and again, insistent, demanding. She straightened slowly, brushing the soil from her hands. She wasn't expecting anyone. Sophia was in Milan for the week. The local farmer who delivered her vegetables came on Fridays. The postman knew to leave packages at the gate. No one else had reason to visit. No one else knew where she lived, except perhaps for the distant relative she had made the mistake of contacting 6 months ago. A cousin on her mother's side, a woman named Lucia, who had always been kind to Elena as a child. Elena had sent her a brief email, nothing more than a few lines to let her know she was alive and well. She had included no details about her location, her work, her life, but perhaps she had included enough. Perhaps Lucia, pressured by Elena's desperate family, had shared what little she knew. Elena walked to the gate. It was a wrought iron structure, old and elegant, with a camera mounted discreetly on the stone pillar. She checked the video feed on her phone and froze. 3 figures stood on the other side of the gate. Her mother, her face pale and drawn beneath a Mediterranean sun, her thin white hair disheveled from travel. Her father, leaning heavily on a cane, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and righteous indignation. And Chloe, golden and tanned as always, but with something new in her face, a hardness, a resentment, the look of a woman who had been forced to carry something heavier than a designer tote. They looked tired, disheveled, like people who had traveled a very long way and expected to be welcomed with open arms. Elena stood very still. The morning light fell across the gate, casting long shadows on the gravel drive. The sea murmured in the distance, indifferent to the small drama unfolding at her doorstep. She pressed the intercom button. "Yes," her mother's voice came through, thin and wavering. Elena, is that you? Let us in, sweetheart. We've come such a long way. We need to see you, sweetheart." The word was strange, foreign. Her mother had never called her sweetheart. That had always been Chloe's word, Chloe's endearment, Chloe's role as the cherished daughter. Elena didn't move. How did you find me? A pause. Her mother glanced at Chloe, who shifted uncomfortably. Cousin Lucia, her mother admitted. She said you'd sent her a letter. She didn't have your address, but she knew the region. We hired someone, a private investigator. It took months, Elena, months of searching. We've been so worried. Worried. The word hung in the air, hollow and wrong. They hadn't been worried about Elena. They had been worried about the absence of her labor, the void she had left in their carefully constructed lives. They had spent a year doing their own chores, managing their own medications, cooking their own meals, and they had hated every minute of it. Elena, please, her father's voice now, gruff and impatient. Let us in. It's hot out here. Your mother's heart condition. She shouldn't be standing in this sun. We've come all this way. The least you can do is let us inside. The least you can do. The phrase she had heard her entire life. The least you can do is help your sister. The least you can do is drive us to the appointment. The least you can do is give up your weekend, your career, your life. The least you can do, Elena, because you are the reliable one, the invisible one, the foundation that requires no maintenance. Elena pressed the button to open the gate. They walked up the gravel drive like conquerors, surveying new territory. Her mother's eyes swept over the villa, the whitewashed walls, the terracotta roof, the lavender garden, the lemon tree, heavy with fruit. Her father leaned on his cane, his breathing labored from the walk. Chloe trailed behind, her designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, her expression a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed resentment. Elena met them at the door. She didn't open it fully. She stood in the threshold, her body blocking the entrance, her face calm and still. Elena, her mother reached for her, arms open, tears already gathering in her eyes. Oh, sweetheart, look at you. You look wonderful. This place is beautiful. We've missed you so much. Elena didn't move into the embrace. She stood very still, her hands at her sides, and let her mother's arms fall back to her sides, empty. You found me, Elena said. You're here. What do you want? Her mother's face crumpled. What do we want? We want to see our daughter. We want to understand why you left without a word, why you cut us off, why you've been hiding from us for a year. We're your family, Elena. We love you. We love you. The words were meant to wound, to guilt, to manipulate. Elena had heard them before, in 100 different variations, always followed by a request for more of her time, her labor, herself. Her father stepped forward, his cane tapping against the stone. Elena, how could you be so selfish? We've had to do our own chores for a year. A year. Your mother's arthritis, my blood pressure. We're not young anymore. We needed you, and you just disappeared. Do you have any idea what that's been like for us? Elena looked at him, at the man who had spent her entire childhood sitting in his recliner, watching television, while she cooked and cleaned and managed the household. At the man who had never once asked her about her day, her dreams, her life. At the man who was now standing on her doorstep, accusing her of selfishness because she had finally stopped being his unpaid servant. Yes, Elena said quietly. I know exactly what it's been like. It's been like my entire life, doing everything for everyone else and receiving nothing in return, being invisible, being taken for granted, being told that my only value was in my usefulness to this family. Her father's face reddened. That's not. We never. You did. Elena's voice didn't rise. Every day, for 34 years, you showed me exactly what I was worth to you, and when I finally stopped allowing it, you called me selfish. Chloe stepped forward, her arms crossed over her chest. Okay, this is dramatic. Elena, we came all this way. Can we at least come inside? Have some water? Talk like civilized people? Elena looked at her sister, at the woman who had spent her entire life traveling, posting, performing, while Elena stayed home and kept the world running. At the woman who had never once offered to help, never once asked if Elena was tired, never once acknowledged the invisible labor that made her golden life possible. No, Elena said, you can't come inside. Chloe's mouth fell open. Excuse me? This is my home. I built it. I earned it. I paid for it with years of work you never saw, never valued, never acknowledged, and I decide who enters it. You are not welcome here. The silence that followed was immense. Her mother's tears spilled over, tracking down her pale cheeks. Her father's grip on his cane tightened until his knuckles went white. Chloe's face cycled through shock, fury, and something that might have been the first stirrings of genuine understanding. "Elena," her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "We're your parents. We raised you. We gave you a home when you had nowhere else to go. How can you turn us away?" Elena looked at her mother, at the woman who had spent decades posting proud tributes to Chloe's travels while dismissing Elena's needs as irrelevant, at the woman who had drained her savings to fund Chloe's dreams while assuming Elena would always be there, reliable and invisible, a safety net that required no maintenance. "You gave me a room," Elena said, "not a home. A home is a place where you are seen, valued, loved for who you are, not for what you provide. You never gave me that. You gave me a list of chores and a title, the reliable one, and you called it love. It wasn't love. It was convenience." Her mother's face shattered. "That's not true. We love you. We've always loved you. Chloe needed more. She was always so fragile, so lost. You were strong. You didn't need us the way she did." "You're right," Elena said. "I didn't need you. I needed you to see me, and you never did. Not once. Not ever." She stepped back, her hand on the door. "You should go. There's a hotel in the village, about 20 minutes down the hill. They'll have rooms. You can rest there before your flight home." Her father's face contorted. "We're not leaving, Elena. We've already packed our bags to move in with you. This place is huge. Plenty of room for all of us. You can't just turn your own parents away. After everything we've done for you, after we gave you gave me nothing." Elena's voice was quiet, but it cut through the warm Mediterranean air like a blade. "Everything I have, I built. Every brick of this villa, every bloom in this garden, every moment of peace I have found. I built it. You contributed nothing. You only took, and I am done giving." She looked at Chloe, who was staring at her with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Not anger, not resentment, something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Chloe," Elena said, "you're their golden child, their world traveler, the one they poured everything into. Now you can pour back. Take care of them, manage their medications, cook their meals, drive them to appointments, be the reliable one for a change. I've done my time." Chloe's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Elena stepped back and began to close the door. Her mother lunged forward, her hand outstretched. "Elena, please don't do this. We're your family. We're all you have." Elena paused, the door half closed. She looked at her mother's tear-streaked face, her father's rigid fury, her sister's stunned silence. She thought about the years she had spent in this villa, the quiet mornings with her coffee, the lavender-scented afternoons, the evenings watching the sun sink into the sea. She thought about the peace she had built, brick by brick, from the wreckage of the life that had been assigned to her. "No," she said, "you're not all I have. I have myself. And for the first time in my life, that's enough." She closed the door. The latch clicked into place with a soft, final sound. Through the window, she watched them stand on the terrace for a long moment, her mother weeping, her father rigid with fury, Chloe looking around at the villa, the garden, the sea, as if seeing for the first time the life her sister had built in the silence she had never bothered to notice. Then, slowly, they turned and walked back down the gravel drive. The gate opened, then closed, the sound of a car engine starting, pulling away, fading into the distance. Elena stood at the window for a long time. The sun climbed higher, the shadows shifting across the terrace stones. The lavender swayed in the breeze. The lemon tree cast its small, perfect shadow. She walked back to the garden. She knelt in the soil and resumed planting the new row of lavender, the one that would bloom next spring, purple and fragrant and alive. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. She had done it. She had drawn the line and held it. She had chosen herself, and she would never, ever go back. The morning after their arrival, Elena woke to the sound of the gate buzzer. She had expected it. She had lain awake for a long time the night before, listening to the distant murmur of the sea and the soft rustle of the lavender in the evening breeze. And she had known, with a cold, clear certainty of a woman who understood her family intimately, that they would not leave quietly. They had traveled too far, invested too much, expected too much. They would not accept a closed door. They would return and return again, until they were either admitted or definitively refused. She was ready. She rose at her usual hour, just after dawn. She showered and dressed in a simple linen shift, the kind of garment that breathed in the Mediterranean heat. She made her coffee, a slow, careful ritual now. The grinding of the beans, the heating of the water, the pouring into the small ceramic cup she had bought at a market in the village. She carried the cup to the terrace and sat in her usual chair, the one that faced the sea. The gate buzzer rang again and again, insistent, demanding. Elena took a slow sip of her coffee. The warmth spread through her chest, grounding her. The sea glittered below, endless and indifferent. The lavender swayed. The lemon tree cast its small, perfect shadow. She picked up her phone and opened the security app. The camera at the gate showed her everything she needed to see. Her mother stood closest to the intercom, her face pale and drawn, her thin white hair disheveled from a night in a cheap hotel room. She was wearing the same clothes she had arrived in. They all were, Elena noticed. They hadn't packed for more than a day. They had expected to be welcomed into the villa, given rooms, fed, cared for. They had expected Elena to fold, as she had always folded, because that was what the reliable daughter did. Her father stood behind her mother, leaning heavily on his cane, his expression a mask of righteous indignation. He kept glancing at the villa, at the whitewashed walls and the terracotta roof, as if he couldn't quite believe that his invisible daughter had built something so beautiful without his permission. And Chloe stood a few paces back, her arms crossed, her designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. She looked bored, annoyed, as if this entire situation was an inconvenience she hadn't signed up for. She kept checking her phone, scrolling through something, her thumb moving in that quick, dismissive flick that meant she was barely present. They were the same people they had always been, the same people who had spent decades taking Elena for granted, dismissing her labor, erasing her humanity, the same people who had arrived at her gate expecting a tearful reunion and an immediate invitation to move into the guest wing. They had learned nothing. Elena pressed the intercom button. Yes? Her mother's face lit up with desperate hope. Elena, sweetheart, thank God. We were so worried. We thought maybe you'd changed your mind overnight. Please, let us in. We just want to talk. We just want to see you. We're your family. We're your family. The words that had been used her entire life to ask her to carry more than her share, to forgive what should never have been forgiven, to erase herself so that others could expand. Elena took another sip of her coffee. I told you yesterday, you're not welcome here. Nothing has changed. Her mother's face crumpled. Elena, please, we've come all this way. Your father's legs are hurting from standing. My heart, the doctor said I shouldn't be under stress. Can't you at least let us in for a few minutes, just to talk, just to rest? Your father's legs, my heart, the familiar litany of ailments deployed like weapons. Elena had heard them for years, every time she tried to carve out a moment for herself, every time she suggested a boundary, every time she dared to imagine a life that wasn't entirely consumed by their needs. I'm sorry you're uncomfortable, Elena said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for her own existence. There's a cafe in the village. They have chairs. You can rest there. Her father pushed forward, his face reddening. Elena, this is ridiculous. We're your parents. We raised you. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? By hiding behind a gate like a coward? By turning us away when we need you most? Elena looked at him through the camera, at the man who had spent her entire childhood sitting in his recliner, watching television, while she cooked and cleaned and managed the household. At the man who had never once asked her about her day, her dreams, her life. At the man who was now standing at her gate, demanding entry, as if her home were an extension of the house on Cedar Street, a place where he was entitled to be served. I spent 20 years being the maid in your house, Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the intercom. I cooked every meal. I managed every bill. I drove you to every appointment. I cleaned up after you day after day while you sat in your recliner and watched television. And not once in 20 years did you thank me. Not once did you see me. I was invisible. I was furniture. I was the reliable one who asked for nothing and received less. Her father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I've earned this silence, Elena continued. I've earned this view, this garden, this peace. I built it with my own hands, from nothing, while you were posting photos of Chloe's travels and telling yourselves that I didn't need anything because I was strong. I wasn't strong. I was surviving. And now I'm living, and you don't get to take that from me. Chloe stepped forward, her phone finally lowered. Elena, come on. This is getting ridiculous. We came all this way. We're your family. Can't you just let us in for a few hours? We'll talk. We'll figure things out, and then we'll go. I promise. Elena looked at her sister, at the woman who had spent her entire life traveling the world while Elena stayed home and kept everything running. At the woman who had never once offered to help, never once asked if Elena was tired, never once acknowledged the invisible labor that made her golden life possible. Chloe, Elena said, you're the world traveler. Remember? The one Mom and Dad posted about every day. Our world traveler, making us proud. Chloe chasing her dreams. So grateful for our amazing daughter. You're the one they poured everything into. The savings, the praise, the pride. You're the one who knows how to navigate the world. I'm sure you can find them a nice hotel, or a flight home, or a permanent solution that doesn't involve me. Chloe's face flickered, a brief, almost imperceptible shadow of something that might have been shame. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar mask of defensive irritation. That's not fair. You can't blame me for what Mom and Dad did. I didn't ask to be the favorite. You didn't ask, Elena agreed, but you also didn't refuse. You took the money. You took the praise. You took the trips. You took everything they offered and never once looked back at the sister who was left behind to clean up the mess. You were complicit, Chloe. You just didn't care enough to notice. Chloe's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. She had never needed one before. Elena's mother pressed forward again, her face wet with tears. Elena, please, we're sorry. We're so sorry. We didn't see. We didn't understand. But we're here now. We want to make it right. Please, just give us a chance. Let us in. Let us be a family again. Elena looked at her mother through the camera, at the woman who had spent decades posting proud tributes to Chloe while dismissing Elena's needs as irrelevant, at the woman who had drained her savings to fund Chloe's dreams while assuming Elena would always be there, reliable and invisible, a safety net that required no maintenance. At the woman who was now weeping at her gate, begging for entry because the life she had built on Elena's labor had finally collapsed. Mom, Elena said quietly, you had 34 years to see me, 34 years to notice that I was drowning, 34 years to ask me just once what I wanted. You never did, not once. And now you're standing at my gate crying because I finally stopped letting you take from me. That's not love, that's regret, and regret is not the same as change. Her mother's sobs grew louder, but Elena didn't waver. My villa has many rooms, she said, but none of them are for people who only see me as a servant. None of them are for people who took 34 years to notice I was alive. None of them are for people who showed up at my gate expecting a tearful reunion and a free place to live without ever once apologizing for what they did. She paused, letting the words settle. You should go. There's nothing for you here. There never was. She turned off the intercom. The screen went dark. The camera still showed them standing at the gate, her mother weeping, her father rigid with fury, Chloe staring at the ground. But the sound was gone. The connection was severed. The door was closed. Elena set down her phone. She picked up her coffee cup and took a slow, deliberate sip. Coffee was still warm, rich and dark. The sea glittered below her, endless and indifferent. The lavender swayed in the morning breeze. The lemon tree cast its small, perfect shadow. She stood up. She walked across the terrace, past the garden, past the lavender and the rosemary, and the single lemon tree heavy with fruit. She walked down the stone steps to the pool, a small, elegant rectangle of turquoise water tucked into the hillside, surrounded by white stone and flowering shrubs. She set her coffee cup on the edge. She slipped off her linen shift, revealing the simple swimsuit beneath. She dove into the water. The coolness enveloped her, a shock of pure, clean sensation. She surfaced, gasping, and floated on her back, her eyes on the endless blue sky. The water held her, supported her, asked nothing of her but her presence. Behind her, beyond the gate, she could hear the faint sound of a car engine starting, the crunch of tires on gravel, the slow fade of her family driving away, back to the village, back to their hotel, back to the life they had built on her labor and were now forced to manage alone. She didn't watch them go. She didn't need to. They were her past. And she was done living in it. She floated in the cool water, the sun warm on her face, and let herself be nothing but present, nothing but alive, nothing but free. She had spent 20 years being the maid in their house. She had spent another 3 years building her escape in the dark. She had spent the past year learning to live in the light. And now, at last, the gate was closed. The intercom was off. The noise of her past was locked on the other side, where it belonged. She was Elena Rossi. She lived in a villa by the sea, and the only person she had to answer to was herself. She closed her eyes and floated, weightless, in the quiet embrace of the water. She was home.